Yo, look like Cleveland Browns front office is looking spooky yet again, bruh. Media team is already pushing the narrative that they finna tank by any means necessary. So this Arch Manning deal or whatever quarterback coming out at 27 is definitely on the board. Now, there is no secret that the Browns is possibly about to get another quarterback this year and next year.
Hold up. Did you catch that? The Cleveland Browns media team is already pushing narratives, setting the stage for what's coming in 2027. And if you think this is just about football, you're missing the bigger picture here, because what we're watching unfold in Cleveland right now is a masterclass in organizational manipulation that every sports league needs to pay attention to. The Browns front office is making moves, the media is playing along, and there's one person who's about to get caught in the crossfire, Shedeur Sanders.
It's just all of this other stuff coming out because word on the street is that the Browns possibly allegedly could be tanking for the 2026 season. Now, how could y'all possibly tank when Shedeur is finna go out there and win football games? Tell you how. They possibly could be tanking because they're not finna allow Shedeur to go out there and win football games. Bruh, yes, this is very much looking like a thing. This looked like this could very much be real.
There it is, the word nobody wants to say out loud, but everyone's thinking, tanking. The Browns could allegedly be positioning themselves to tank the entire 2026 season, not for draft picks in general, not for roster flexibility, for one specific player, Arch Manning. And here's what makes this fascinating from a sports business perspective. This isn't just about football strategy, this is about media narratives, organizational politics, and how front offices use reporters to shape public perception months before anything actually happens. Sound familiar? Because this exact playbook is being run in women's basketball right now.
This morning, it's so much, y'all. I ain't gonna lie.
You won't use the term tank, but that's what it is.
I don't know.
That's what you're doing.
If I wanted them to tank, I'd say I'd want them to tank. I don't want them to tank. I want to let the chips fall where they may.
You just know they're going to be bad. So they're going to be bad. So 2027, you'll get a top 5 draft pick, and that means you're going to get one of the quarterbacks.
Yeah. Okay. But I don't want them to lose on purpose. If they end up going out there and winning 9 games this year with Shedeur Sanders, I'm going to go, okay, let's put a little bit more around him. Let's see where this goes now.
If you were to plot out the different ways that you would hope this goes, finishing in the middle next year, it would probably be worse.
Listen to what they're actually saying here. Kevin Stefanski's reputation is getting dissected on local radio. They're talking about miscalculations, missed opportunities, and how finishing in the middle would be the worst case scenario. Not losing, not struggling, finishing middle of the pack. Because a mediocre season with Shedeur Sanders doesn't get you Arch Manning in 2027. This is the same media ecosystem that exists in the WNBA. Beat reporters who are so close to organizations that they stop asking hard questions and start running interference. Local media that protects front office decisions because access matters more than accountability. And fans who get fed narratives instead of news.
Of all these.
Well, would it be the worst case scenario, or are we just building around Shedeur after that and seeing where that goes? Because I don't think you can answer that question until 2027 and 2028.
If it takes you out of the mix of a top 5 draft pick the following year,
yeah, you would
that
think
is
that
a
way.
worse spot.
So that was one of the takes, man, that was on 92 The Fan today, talking about the Browns potentially tanking. Now, there is another clip of them pretty much talking about Kevin Stefanski, how they kind of feel like he didn't do as bad.
These guys hate that Kevin Stefanski has a good reputation around the league and that people...
Now they're going after Kevin Stefanski's coaching credentials, talking about how he won Coach of the Year twice, but questioning whether he actually deserved it, suggesting maybe someone else was calling plays and he took credit. This is character assassination disguised as sports analysis. And the reason this matters for WNBA fans is because we see the same pattern play out constantly. When a women's basketball coach gets pushed out, the media narrative shifts overnight. Suddenly their accomplishments get asterisks. Their winning seasons get reframed as lucky breaks. Their relationships with players get scrutinized in ways that never happened when they were winning. The playbook is identical across sports.
Of all people.
Yeah, but he did lose a lot of games that year. So
yes, he did.
He did. If that's what he's mad about, that he wishes he would have had more individual seasons, but on losing teams, well, then I guess Kevin wasn't your guy. But if you want to have good team seasons, Jarvis, you had nobody better than Kevin Stefanski. And where is... Where are the good conversations there? Was it all just bad?
But what his problem is that if this happened, he didn't tell anybody. I think he wanted people to tell it to him. It sounds as if Kevin was covering up somebody else calling plays and him taking the credit for it in one of his years where he was made coach of the year. Am I wrong about that? Is that what Jarvis is?
Here's what's actually happening in Cleveland and why it connects directly to issues in women's basketball. The Browns have Deshaun Watson's massive contract on their books. They can't move it. They can't restructure it effectively. So they're stuck. But instead of being honest about that financial reality, they're creating a narrative where the problem is everything else. The coaching, the scheme, the supporting cast, the quarterback competition. The WNBA does this constantly with salary cap issues. Teams can't pay players what they're worth because of the CBA structure, but instead of fighting publicly for better revenue sharing or challenging the economic model, organizations create narratives about chemistry issues, playing time disputes, or coaching philosophy differences. It's misdirection.
And maybe some other people who was actually calling the plays. That's what I think Jarvis' problem. That is what Jarvis's problem is.
Did the players know?
If he knew, then that means a lot of other players probably did.
What's the big deal? If the players knew, what am I missing here? This seems like a big who cares after the fact. You're just mad another team paid him a lot of money to be the head coach.
To him, you're pushing the buck.
Sounds like to me. By the way,
to him, you're pushing the buck.
A guy who coached you to have your best team see.
These dudes are so invested in Kevin Stefanski. It ain't even funny, man.
The entire era of Kevin Stefanski, and then adding at the end, his 2 coach of the years. Yeah, those were good seasons.
Watch how they're setting up the Malik Willis comparison. They're floating the idea that the Browns missed out on a quarterback who was available at a bargain rate, that if they'd just been smarter, more proactive, they could have avoided this whole mess. This is revisionist history in real time. Malik Willis wasn't a consensus top quarterback prospect. He wasn't a sure thing, but now that he's had some success, suddenly he becomes the measuring stick for organizational failure. The WNBA saw this exact pattern with how teams talked about passing on certain draft picks. When a player develops elsewhere, suddenly the narrative becomes about organizational incompetence rather than the reality that player development is unpredictable and context dependent.
To do
with
the successes of those teams, and that's laughable.
That was his impression of it.
It's a very silly impression, is what I'm saying.
It probably isn't all the way accurate, but again,
surprised Atlanta didn't hire Alex Van Pelt and hire Jarvis Landry as a consultant.
Let me answer this question while you're being difficult about it.
How am I being difficult?
Did you or did you not know that Kevin had some problems with some players on the team?
Sure, like 100% of coaches.
How is this?
Like 100% of coaches at every level of every sport. What kind of groundbreaking theory was that?
The successful ones is that you go against the players because they're usually malcontents.
How many guys said playing for Bill Belichick was miserable and they hated life and they hated football, but then they get to trot around their Super Bowl rings?
Yeah, but we didn't.
But that's what I'm saying.
We won 8 games in 2 years.
Now we get to the heart of it. The worst case scenario, according to these media members, is finishing middle of the pack with Shedeur Sanders. Not because it means the team is bad, but because it takes them out of position to draft Arch Manning in 2027. Think about what that means. They're already writing off a quarterback who hasn't played a single NFL snap. They're already planning for his replacement 2 years from now, and they're doing it openly, on the radio, with no pushback. This is organizational dysfunction masquerading as strategic planning, and it's the same energy we see when WNBA teams draft a rookie, give her half a season, and then start talking publicly about whether she's the future or just a piece. Players become assets to be managed rather than people to be developed. Here's where the WNBA parallel becomes crystal clear. These Cleveland media members are so embedded with the organization that they're not reporting news anymore. They're shaping narratives. They're testing public reaction to ideas the front office is considering. They're providing cover for decisions that haven't been made yet. This is access journalism at its worst, and we see this constantly in women's basketball coverage. Beat reporters who are so dependent on team access that they become unofficial PR representatives. Writers who soften criticism because they need those locker room interviews. Analysts who won't call out bad coaching or front office decisions because it might cost them sources. The incentive structure is broken, and it produces coverage that serves organizations instead of fans. So let's connect all these dots because this matters way beyond Cleveland Browns football. What we're watching is a case study in how sports organizations manipulate media narratives to prepare fans for unpopular decisions. The Browns want flexibility to move on from Shedeur Sanders before he even arrives. They want to tank for Arch Manning in 2027 without actually saying those words, so they use local media to float trial balloons, test reactions, and build justification. The WNBA operates in this exact same ecosystem, just with less money and fewer people paying attention. When a team wants to move on from a coach, the media narrative shifts weeks before the announcement. Suddenly there are stories about philosophical differences or concerns about player development. When a team wants to trade a star player, stories start appearing about contract demands or chemistry issues. It's all narrative construction designed to make the inevitable decision seem reasonable. Here's what makes the Browns situation particularly instructive. They're not even hiding it anymore. They're openly discussing tanking strategies on local radio. They're debating whether winning 9 games with Shedeur would be worse than losing with him. They're treating a human being's career as a spreadsheet calculation, and the media is facilitating every step of this process instead of challenging it. The WNBA has the same problem, amplified by the league's smaller media footprint. When there are only a handful of reporters covering a team, and those reporters need access to do their jobs, who's actually holding organizations accountable? Who's asking the hard questions about why a lottery pick isn't getting minutes? Who's challenging front office decisions that don't make basketball sense? The answer is often nobody, because the incentive structure doesn't reward that kind of journalism. Think about what these Cleveland media members are actually saying. Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year twice. He took the Browns to the playoffs. He dealt with constant quarterback instability and still produced winning seasons. But now that the organization wants to move in a different direction, suddenly his accomplishments get questioned. Maybe someone else was calling plays. Maybe he didn't deserve those awards. Maybe the success was despite him, not because of him. This is gaslighting on an organizational scale. And we see it in women's basketball all the time. A coach builds a program, develops players, wins games, but when the organization decides to make a change, suddenly the narrative shifts. The winning wasn't sustainable. The system was outdated. The relationships were strained. It's character assassination disguised as analysis. The Malik Willis comparison is particularly insidious. They're using hindsight to create a narrative of organizational failure. But here's the reality. Every team passed on Malik Willis multiple times. He wasn't a consensus prospect. His development in Green Bay was unexpected. But now he becomes a weapon to beat up the Browns front office, which creates justification for whatever moves they want to make next. The WNBA does this with draft picks constantly. A player develops into a star on her second or third team, and suddenly the narrative becomes about how her original team missed on her. But that ignores the reality of player development, coaching fit, organizational support, and plain luck. It's results-oriented thinking that creates false narratives about competence and decision-making. Here's what really matters in the Browns situation and why it connects to broader issues in professional sports. Shedeur Sanders is about to enter an organization that's already planning his exit strategy. The media is already discussing scenarios where he's not the answer. The front office is already positioning for 2027, and all of this is happening before he's played a single snap. Imagine being a WNBA rookie in that situation. You get drafted, and immediately the local beat reporters are speculating about whether you're really the future or just a placeholder. The organization is non-committal in public statements. The coaching staff is already looking ahead to next year's draft class. How are you supposed to develop confidence and grow as a player in that environment? The Browns are openly discussing whether winning would be bad for their long-term plans. Think about that. Winning games with Shedeur Sanders would be considered a negative outcome because it takes them out of position to draft Arch Manning. This is tanking logic, but dressed up in strategic language. And the media is going along with it, debating the merits of different losing scenarios instead of challenging the fundamental premise. The WNBA has seen this with teams that are clearly punting on seasons to position for better draft picks. But because the league is smaller and the media coverage is thinner, these strategies don't get the same scrutiny. Teams can claim they're developing young players or building for the future while actively avoiding winning. And without robust media coverage challenging those narratives, organizations face no accountability. What makes this Cleveland situation a perfect case study is how transparent it is. They're not even pretending anymore. Local media members members are openly gaming out tanking scenarios. They're discussing which losing record would be optimal. They're debating whether Shedeur winning 9 games would be worse than winning 4. This is organizational malpractice being discussed as legitimate strategy. And here's the WNBA connection that matters most. When organizations treat players as assets instead of people, when media members prioritize access over accountability, when fans are fed narratives instead of news, everybody loses. The players lose because they're not given fair opportunities to succeed. The fans lose because they're not getting honest coverage. The sport loses because the focus shifts from competition to manipulation. The Browns are setting up Shedeur Sanders to fail, not because they think he can't play, but because they've already decided they want Arch Manning in 2027, and anything that interferes with that plan becomes a problem to be managed. That's not player development. That's not organizational strategy. That's dysfunction disguised as planning. The WNBA needs to learn from this. When teams draft players they're not fully committed to developing. When organizations create media narratives to justify decisions before those decisions are made. When beat reporters become stenographers instead of journalists. The entire ecosystem suffers. And the people who pay the biggest price are always the players who deserved better. So ask yourself this: if you were Shedeur Sanders, how would you handle walking into an organization where local media is already discussing your replacement? Where the front office is already planning for 2027? Where winning might actually hurt your long-term prospects because it interferes with the team's tanking strategy. Because that's not a hypothetical, that's the reality he's about to face. And it's the same reality WNBA rookies face when they join organizations that aren't fully invested in their success. The Browns situation is a mirror for everything broken in professional sports media and organizational culture. And if the WNBA wants to avoid these same pitfalls, it needs to demand better from teams, from media members, and from the systems that govern how players are treated and covered. Because Shedeur Sanders deserves better than this. And so does every player who's ever been treated as a placeholder instead of a person.